With the incredible performance of the RX-78-2, it wouldn't be long before the Federation came up with a variety of ideas to increase its performance. And one of these ideas would be in the form of the FSWS Project. There is debate on whether it stands for Federal Suit Weapon System or Full Armor System and Weapon System, but its official goal was clear: create the Federation's next-generation tactical mobile suit. Its top secret, unofficial goal though was slightly different: to create an elite new type squadron that was outfitted with Gundams, each possessing the firepower of a battleship. However, I also read that it's possible that the idea of making a full armor RX-78-2 came out before it entered combat, and that the goal of the SWS project then gradually changed based on the combat records of the White Base. Meaning that the official goal was actually simply the initial goal, and that the unofficial goal was then their final goal. And maybe this is also where the confusion concerning the acronym comes from. Full Armor System and Weapon System seems to fit nicely with the original goal, whereas Federal Suit Weapon System goes well with the eventual goal. And talking about RX-78-2 related equipment, maybe you want to outfit yourself with some cool RX-78-2 merchandise, like from today's sponsor FX Creations. They just unveiled their new official RX-78-2 collection, and they sent over some really cool examples. First up, we have this sling bag that is not just made out of sturdy and durable material, but also has a really sleek design. As with so many of their items, the design doesn't scream anime, but another fan will immediately recognize what you're wearing. And despite its compact size, you can still stuff a lot of things in there, like modeling goods, Avatar Fumina model kit, a power bank which can then be hooked up to the USB port, Mieriko-chan manga, PS Vita, wallet, and more. We've also got this carabiner here, and to wear it, you can hook up the sling either to the left or the right buckle, so you can easily hang it from your left or right shoulder. The wallet then is made out of genuine leather and has some really cool RX-78-2 theming going on, including a laser engraved metal plaque, which is also where the coins go. On the inside, you'll have plenty of room for all of your cash and important cards, like my ID card, debit card, and credit cards, which I'm not showing for obvious reasons, my Nikkei card, my Maycafe card, my Pasmo, and even my chonky old school driver's license. For some RX-70 H2Os then, we've got this vacuum insulated bottle. It'll keep cold drinks cold and warm drinks warm for up to 24 hours. You've got a regular drinking hole on one side and a pop-up straw on the other side, which can be popped up with a single button press. And it even comes with something that many Gundams don't come with: a lock. It's also leak-proof and closed, so no need to worry when carrying it around. You can check out everything that they have on offer with the link down below, and if you use the coupon code KAKAROT, you'll also get a 10% discount. When the FSWS project was first conceived then, a lot of ideas were thrown around, some of which showed promise, whereas others felt more like the ideas of a toy company. After a lot of brainstorming then, the ideas were boiled down to the three that showed the most promise, and the design competition was on. One of these machines was the FA-78-1, and the others were supposedly the FA-78-303 and the FA-78-400. And based on that sentence alone, you've probably already figured out that it was the FA-78-1 that won the battle, because you've never heard of the other two. Usually it is simply called the Full Armor Gundam, but it is sometimes also referred to as the Gundam Full Armor Type, and later on also the Full Armor Gundam Type A, to differentiate it from the Type B. Based on the first approved draft of the Full Armor Gundam then, the Luna 2 design team went to work. With the RX-78-2's combat data at their disposal, they first designed supplemental armor for the areas of the body that were the most likely to be hit, like the chest, the cockpit area, shoulders, lower arms, and the skirt armor. Then, like they did with the gym cannon, they added armor to the legs to balance things out, and they made the feet bigger to increase the ground contact to better distribute the heavy weight. And then to compensate for the lost mobility, extra thrusters with an output comparable to those of the core booster were added to the legs as well. This extra armor could also be purged if needed, and according to the Master Archive Mobile Suit Full Armor Gundam book, it was made out of a material called hyper titanium. Unfortunately, the book never elaborates on how strong this material was or what it even was in the first place, and I also haven't seen this material mentioned anywhere else. But despite the name then, the Full Armor Gundam wasn't just about increasing the armor of the RX-78-2. It also had new cooling vents, and of course, new weaponry. 2 triple missile launchers on the chest, 1 double missile launcher in each knee, a 360mm rocket cannon with 5 rounds on the right side of the backpack, a long-range optical sight on the left side of the backpack, and then its new main weapon, a twin beam rifle. Now, the RX-78-2 already had the premiere of packing the power of a battleship in a handy mobile suit-sized package. But it did have one downside. It only held 15 shots, and the only way to have these replenished was to return to base and recharge it, or, get an entirely different beam rifle that still had its 15 shots. This was before the days of E-Pack technology, where a beam rifle could have a battery magazine. And so, the twin beam rifle gave the Full Armor Gundam more ammo in 2 ways. First of all, it was literally a twin beam rifle, featuring 2 barrels, each with their own E-cap, giving it twice the shots. And then the second thing was that they made these barrels exchangeable. So 2 of them could also be stored on the small buckler-esque shield on the left arm. The downside then was, because of these 2 features, that the barrels were much larger than those of standard beam rifles, and combined with the shield slapped on top of them, it made the twin beam rifle a pretty hefty weapon. And on top of that, I've also seen reports that because it was so cutting edge, that there might have been some technical problems with it as well. And in addition to these new weapons, because the core machine is an RX-78-2, it kept the same 60mm Vulcan guns and 2 beam sabers, although they're now stored on a simplified rack on the back skirt that no longer had the capability to charge them. The Full Armor Gundam was all about ranged firepower after all. And if that still wasn't enough, it could of course still be outfitted with any other weapon that the RX-78 could also use, like the standard beam rifle, hyper bazooka, Gundam hammer, etc. The big problem with this machine then is because it is such a top secret mobile suit that nobody knows whether it was actually built or not. The Federation never openly acknowledged it, and there was never any physical evidence, be it the mobile suit itself, spare parts, or even the production lines for it. The most we have is that the Gym 2 Semi-Striker uses a similar looking shield. So because of the Federation's secrecy, the Full Armor Gundam was widely regarded as never having been built. And the people who were claiming that it was built were using things like unreliable sources, images that were later proven to be from computer simulations, like this famous image of the Full Armor Gundam fighting against the perfect Zeong, or they were straight up misrepresenting fictional war stories as real. And who knows, maybe some even used proof that was made by the UC equivalent of our current day AI image generators. However, rumors of the Full Armor Gundam existing persisted, and in UC 0094, a book would be published that managed to change the mind of quite some people. It was called 1 Year War: The Complete History, and was actually written with the involvement of military personnel, including high-ranking ones like former General Vic Habakkuk. In the book, it is stated that the Full Armor Gundam did see some combat during the 1 Year War, and in addition to this, it is said that the Federation's number 7 ace, Heinz Bayer, scored all of his kills with a Full Armor Gundam. So now, it is believed that a small number of units were produced near the end of the war. But let's go over all of the different opinions that there are on the Full Armor Gundam's existence. The first theory is that it was never produced. The engineers thought that the added armor and weapons weighed the machine down way too much, and that the added thrusters simply weren't able to compensate for this. Instead, the machine would be further developed into the Heavy Gundam, a machine that we'll tackle in the next part of this video. Another theory then posits that the Full Armor Gundam might have been in development, but that it was halted because the RX-78-2 was shot down at Abawaku, because it was meant as optional parts for Amro's RX-78-2. And finally then, we have a plethora of sightings and rumors that would suggest that the Full Armor Gundam was built, and there were so many of these that the machine even got the nickname the King of Urban Legend. One of the earliest supposed sightings was of a blue Full Armor Gundam that took part in the Battle of Solomon on December 24th. The base unit for this Full Armor Gundam was the RX-78-1, and it was piloted by Captain Takashi Kitamoto. But unfortunately, the unit along with the pilot were nothing more than the main characters of a fictional war story. One day later then, a Full Armor Gundam bearing the number 38 was supposedly part of the fleet that responded to Zeon's attempt to launch a nuclear attack on Site 6. And then during the Battle of Abawaku, a Full Armor Gundam appeared, which allegedly fought with and was destroyed by the Crimson Lightning. The pilots of these two aforementioned Full Armor Gundams have never been officially confirmed by the Federation, but the Master Archive book speculates that both might have been the same unit piloted by Heinz Bayer, as this would make the most sense considering his high kill count. Next up then, in 0083 we get another mention of the Full Armor Gundam, and this time it was even somewhat perpetuated by the Federation. Supposedly, Zeon remnants, under the leadership of Johnny Raiden, wanted to carry out a surprise attack on Site 7, and part of the unit that intercepted them was the Full Armor Gundam. However, due to the state of the Federation government at the time, nothing about this can be taken at face value, and it can even be questioned if the surprise attack happened at all, let alone if there was a Full Armor Gundam involved. Members of the Federation government were looking for any excuse to justify the creation of the Titans, and at the same time, they wanted to make a strong impression, for which a powerful unit like the Full Armor Gundam would have been perfect. Finally then, we have the most outlandish theory, that a special elite new type squadron was created and consisted of 8 Full Armor Gundams that were stationed on board of a North Pole class assault carrier. Training began in December, and by the end of the war, they would begin their top secret mission, taking out the defenses of Granada to prepare for a full-scale invasion of the Zeon homeland. To what extent this is true though, is of course impossible to know. The war ended before this operation could begin in earnest, but it is of course not out of the question for the unit to have been formed and for them to have been involved in small skirmishes. Still, I believe that if there was a Full Armor Gundam at all, that it was most likely the single unit piloted by Heinz Bayer. But this then still leaves one more question. what was the machine inside of those full armor parts? Because originally, the full armor Gundam was intended to be formed with the RX-78-2 piloted by Amuro Ray, but due to a variety of circumstances, this never came to be. Due to production delays, the parts weren't ready when the Gundam was at Jawbro, so it couldn't be used for the Battle of Solomon. And then between the Battle of Solomon and the Battle of Obawa-Ku, Amuro requested the Gundam's speed and mobility to be upgraded, not its firepower. So basically the exact opposite of what the full armor parts were offering. So even though they were potentially ready at this point, they were again not issued to Amuro's RX-78-2. Meaning that if the full armor Gundam did appear on the battlefield, it must have been some other RX-78-2. And for this, we have two leading theories. Either it was a brand new unit, or it was the repaired original RX-78-1. Remember, despite the popular image of Unit 1 being this, by the time that it was shipped out to Site 6, the RX-78-1, RX-78-2, and RX-78-3 were actually identical to each other. Our maybe non-existent full armor Gundam then also got quite a few rumored variants. First, let's talk about the other plans for the full armor Gundam that didn't make it to production. We don't have any images for these machines, but we do have a description. The FA-78-303, which has extra thrusters attached to its legs, and the FA-78-400, which has 4 beam cannons and a large booster unit. Another then was a full armor Gundam on which the 360mm rocket cannon was replaced with a second sensor unit. Because this unit acted as much more than just a gun sight and included a variety of sensors, it was thought that this variant would make for a great reconnaissance unit. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, there also exists an illustration with a full armor Gundam using 2 rocket cannons, although no additional information is given for this configuration. A later variant then, that was supposedly made, was the full armor Gundam Type B. At the Battle of Obawa-Ku, the Federation's fleet wasn't able to provide enough supporting fire. So to prevent something like this from happening again, they wanted to make a full armor Gundam with even more firepower so that it could simply take on an enemy fleet all by itself. The base structure of the B-type remained unchanged, and it mainly got upgrades to its weapons. The built-in missile launchers held more missiles, being 7 on each side of the chest and 6 in each knee, and then its main weapon, being the beam rifle, got a major overhaul thanks to advancements in beam technology. Rather than using replaceable but very chunky barrels to give it more beam shots, the generator that was inside of the full armor part's backpack was made more energy efficient. The beam rifle was also upgunned to 3 barrels, and it had 3 firing modes. 1 single shot at a time, all 3 at once, or rapid alternating fire. And since the shield now no longer had to be able to hold spare barrels, it was remodeled to hold beam sabers instead, which could quickly be used while inside of the shield. And it also got an extra weapon, a big missile launcher mounted on the left side of the backpack. It held 2 large missiles, and on the top were 5 smaller 2-tube missile launchers, which could fire 2 volleys each, giving it a total of 22 missiles. And once all of these were fired, it could be purged for better mobility. The final change then with the B-type was that the base Gundam inside was supposedly the RX-78-3, which is why the entire thing is painted in the grayish bluish colors of the RX-78-3. But just as with the Type A, there is debate on whether or not the Type B actually existed. Again, the Federation hasn't officially commented on the matter, but most experts agree that this thing definitely wasn't made. Its performance in the simulator was simply way too high compared to contemporary mobile suits, so it is questionable that this was feasible in real life. Despite this though, one variant is rumored to have existed. It went by the model number FA78B and appears to be the B-type, but with different handheld weapons. The shield with the beam sabers is now equipped on the right arm, and in its place on the left arm is a spike shield, the shield that was famously used by the Jim Striker. And of course, we can't talk about the full armor Gundam without mentioning the massive Burstliner. A thing that was less of a handheld weapon and more of a mobile gun emplacement. It was essentially a battleship-class megaparticle cannon mounted on a spaceship that was controlled by a mobile suit. And in most illustrations, that mobile suit is the full armor Gundam. Supposedly, the plan was to produce 8 of these things, which could then all be stored on board of a North Pole class assault carrier. And just as with the full armor Gundam, we don't know if the thing was actually built or not. The most common theory is that it was just a concept, but we do have 2 sightings of the thing. One prototype was supposedly stolen by Zeon, transported to Australia, and then put on a train to transport it to their Huandon fortress. According to one account, the train was destroyed, along with the cannon, but according to another account, the train did make it to the fortress, where the cannon was then mounted on their brand new Rhinoceros mobile armor. The second sighting then comes from UC0090, where Ingrid Zero used one together with her heavy Gundam. Whether it existed or not though, it would serve as inspiration for later weapons, like the sub-flight systems, the Mega Bazooka launcher, and the Mega Rider. One extremely obscure variant of the full armor Gundam then is the High Mobility Gundam. Now, making a high mobility version of a heavily armored and heavily armed mobile suit might not sound like the best idea, but the idea does check out. It only uses the leg armor with the extra thrusters and the twin beam gun, and then supplements these with a new high-performance backpack and new chest armor that also seems to have some overhauled cooling systems. And in real life, this machine would become the basis for the RX-78 F00 HMT Gundam High Mobility type. Going back to halfway to 1 Year War then, when the RX-78-1 prototype Gundam was about to be completed, a request was made by the Federation's High Command, with the most important front being the Earth at this time. Especially the higher-ups of the Federation's ground forces wanted a more ground-focused version of the RX-78-1. But developing a whole new unit at this point, even if it was just a spin-off, could have potentially delayed the V project, something that was deemed unacceptable. But once development began on the full armor Gundam, the idea was tossed around to make a similar set of add-on parts, but with a focus on ground combat. The base machine for these parts was the RX-78-1, and the major difference with the regular full armor Gundam was weight concern. Because of course, this machine was going to be operating under gravity. Instead of missile launchers on its torso and knees, it now had a spray missile launcher on the left side of its backpack, the beam sabers were stored on the left shield, and instead of the giant twin beam rifle with replaceable barrels, it had a much smaller twin beam rifle with fixed barrels. What did remain mostly the same then was the 360mm rocket cannon and sensor pod combo. The weight of the ground type was successfully reduced while still keeping its firepower mostly intact. But this still wouldn't be enough to get the thing produced, as there was still a number of fundamental problems. First of all, there was still the worry that further development of this thing and production of this thing would hinder the V project. And second of all, there were performance issues. Not only did the leg-mounted thrusters not adequately compensate for the added weight, they actually hindered the unit's maneuverability even further. And to make matters worse yet, data showed that the Luna titanium armor of the standard Gundam was already plenty enough to shrug off bullets from the Zaku's machine gun. So it was deemed that the extra armor was pointless at best. So instead, the Federation's ground forces decided to go for lightweight and high mobility units, something that would eventually lead to the creation of the Pixie. The one thing from the full armor Gundam ground type that would be made though was its spray missile launcher, as part of the gun cannon's equipment. Next up then, we have a variant of the full armor Gundam that I discovered while I was editing this video, the Gundam Armor type. It's really just a full armor Gundam without its leg armor, and it was designed for the Micro Gundam line, a series of small and cheap action figures that needed a little bit of assembly. And I really like that it addresses something that I found a bit odd while researching the standard full armor Gundam. The main reason for the leg armor was supposedly to balance things out, like they did with the Gym Cannon. But the full armor Gundam was mostly meant for space, where this balance was less important, which is also why the dedicated space version of the Gym Cannon had added thrusters instead of added armor on its legs. So who knows, maybe if the full armor Gundam was actually built and then further developed, a version with legs inspired by the Gym Cannon Space Assault type could have been next. And finally then, we have a full armor Gundam that was definitely built. The full armor Gundam Thunderbolt version. Set in an alternate version of the Universal Century, the FSWS plan here had yet another spin-off, which used a completely different design philosophy. In addition to giving the mobile suit extra armor to increase its defensive capabilities, they also gave it 2 sub-arms, which were designed to hold an extra standard issue shield. So combined with the 2 on the regular arms, it had a total of 4 shields. And to offset that additional weight, it didn't just rely on raw thrust like the standard full armor Gundam, but instead went with sub-thrusters that made the Thunderbolt version a surprisingly agile machine. Its weapons then were equally deadly and seemed to be a combination of the A-type and the B-type loadouts, albeit slightly different. It has a twin beam rifle that is powered by removable energy packs, 6 of which can be stored on the backpack. The conventional rocket cannon is replaced by a large beam cannon, the large missile pod by a smaller 6-tube one. It has 3 beam sabers, and its body now houses a lot more missile launchers. 8 on each side of the torso, 4 on each front skirt, side skirt, and back skirt, and 6 on each knee, making for a total of 52. And for new weapons, it has a 5-tube rocket launcher on its left arm. And this bundle of Zeon-killing joy would be used very effectively by E.O. Fleming. Until he lost his Gundam to the Zeon Remnants, who then used it to make the perfect Gundam Thunderbolt version. But I'll talk more about this thing in the next part of this video, when I also talk about the regular version of the perfect Gundam. And another thing that will have to wait for a future video is the origin version of the full armored Gundam, because that thing is just an entirely different can of worms. And that has been all for the development history of the full armored Gundam, a mobile suit that may or may not have existed. But this is not where the story of the full armored Gundam ends. So join me next time when we talk about a Gundam that definitely did exist, the Heavy Gundam. A big thanks to FX Creations for sponsoring this video, Again, links to their stuff down below. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.